All right, welcome back to Coaches Exploring Clarity. And today we're going to look at Chapter 11, Authenticity, Your True Identity. And it starts with a quote from Richard Dawkins, evolutionary biologist. Matter flows from place to place and momentarily comes together to be you. Whatever you are, therefore, you are not the stuff of which you are made. I don't know about you guys, but this, even though the chapter is super short, it's kind of blowing my mind in
Mm,
terms of, the implications of it and the depth of it, I guess, is maybe the way to describe it.
yeah, right with you on that one, Greg. For me, this is so far the chapter.
Mm,
Um, and interestingly, I must admit, I've kind of come in today with I've got my mind somewhere else, and I was oh yeah, I don't really know if I want to do this. Oh, I don't know what to
mm,
say. And this is like, as you said,
yeah.
mind blowing from that very quote by Richard Dawkins. Because what came to me is the fact that uh, because now that we have like the proof of this, and when Jamie often talks about paradigm shift,
Mm,
like being able to see this, I could sort of really see how, at least in my case, how I'm like now I really feel with this the information from this chapter that I'm dealing with, living in, and feeling attuned to this new paradigm. And it's because I now know, whereas let's say even 20 years ago, scientists already did know, I didn't. But because this is not just because somebody called Richard Dawkins, who even is an evolutionary biologist, says this, like this has been scientifically proven to
mm,
be true. There is no other way about it. Matter flows, matter is the basis of everything. Matter from the energy or whatever it is. So that anything I read after this is undoubtedly true.
mm,
So that I can actually take on board what Jamie is saying. Whereas if I just look 20 years ago, like, yeah, a lot of work in my work in a spiritual sort of healing kind of environment, but it was sort of, albeit taught to me by or from, let's say, the scriptures, from what Buddha said, from what the ancient Egyptians said, from what anybody said. It's like, yeah, but that's like just a theory. It's
mm,
still just a theory. But this, it just suddenly struck me, no, my God, this is true. It's not a thing that somebody's written and you either like it or you don't. This is actual fact. And from that, the rest of the chapter just literally, as we said before, it just blew my mind because it just cannot be any other way. And there's so many insights and connections that I made reading it. So, what a way to start a chapter.
mm.
Can you share one, Elaine?
Sorry,
Can you share one?
can I share one?
Mm,
An insight.
mm.
Okay. That's a difficult question. Okay.
Sorry.
The the idea that I realized that everything, again, I have to talk in because this is me, of course. Everything that I do is based on my thinking. And every time I think, and I'm just going to say literally big word, anything in a thought generated perceptual reality, it is always in some way compared to something else. which at the same time is in a thought-generated perceptual reality of somebody else, if you like. And as long as everything that we do remains in that way, almost a comparison, like you compare you, or who you think you are, up to date to something else. And for as long as you stay there, life, I'm kind of thinking, is always going to be at some point or another very uncomfortable. But now that I know that what guides me or what makes me me is nothing to do with that at all, absolutely nothing. It's something else, which is then called wisdom. But wisdom was also one of those words that existed in my mind, my own thought-generated perceptual reality, which was created, like the understanding of the word wisdom was created from that. It wasn't created from where it actually came from. And wisdom belongs to the realms of the formless. And now that and the word itself, formless, is something, well, it just doesn't exist. Well, it's got nothing to do with what's formless. But now I have, let's say, in my mind, again, Buddha, God, the ancient Egyptians, Chinese, Japanese, anybody else, they've always known this to be true. But in my world, my life, I needed the proof. And I actually have the proof now. And it's come from this sentence. So that I now know that I don't need to be looking for anything that's outside of me, ever. And anytime I do feel uncomfortable, unhappy, miserable, not up to it, not good enough, it's always good enough compared to whom? Well, the only one I can actually compare myself to is myself, who already knows better, the real me. And that's what came from this, which I thought, for me personally, was just incredible. That was one of the many insights. And I know we're kind of trying to go through this in order, but I'll just jump forward a little bit on page 128. If we stop for a moment, as Jamie says, and consider the planet we live on, as you're reading these words, the energy behind life is moving from formless into form and back again. And I started reading the list and I was going, yeah. Oh, yeah, get that. Babies are being born. This makes sense. Flowers are blooming. Ooh, yeah, birds are flying. Of course, this makes sense. And then the word, countless billions of thoughts are emerging, then disappearing. It never even came into my awareness to even be aware or consider the very word in the English language, in this case, thought. It just wasn't in my, it's a word that kind of people write or talk about, or you're thinking or you're not thinking. But like in this sense, I don't even know if I'm explaining exactly how big that is for me. Like I sort of was getting quite well on with my little life, understanding lots of things, like all of those things on those lists. And then Jamie comes up with countless billions of thoughts are emerging, then disappearing. Wow. And that's all they're doing. In and out, in and out, out and in and out. And then poof, they've gone. And when they've just gone, so has everything that you've always been thinking that is telling you who you are is not true, because you're not even looking at who you really are, because who you really are is none of that anyway. So yeah. I think I'll shut up now.
I think that was rather beautiful, actually. Thank you.
I love how you picked that one bullet point out of that list. It's like, because I had read that and I'd highlighted that whole section, but it hadn't really hit me the way that it hit you and the way that it just hit me now as you were explaining it. But yeah, it's almost like somehow masterfully Jamie's put like this hidden little gem in this list of bullet points that are so innocuous, like babies are being born, flowers are blooming. Yeah. And then this one that you just pointed out is like, holy crap. Yeah, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
And how about you, Lynn? What jumped out at you?
So much. The overall, my overall feeling sorry, I'm getting interference. My overall feeling from this whole chapter is, what a load of. I just feel like, wow, that first quote, and I think I don't know about you guys, but I remember years ago when I first started coaching and trying to persuade people, you're not your job, you're not your label, you're not just a mom or dad or whatever you look like. I used to try and persuade people of that, and I'm realizing, oh wow, I didn't believe that. I don't think I believed that. I thought I was the something and the something and had to do things and prove things and have things to appear to be something. So as I'm reading through this, and I'm going through the paragraphs under a case of mistaken identity, where it goes from we're born and we didn't realize we had those eyes face. But then you start to create the map of you. You start to create a map of you. So and last week I know we talked about the map. And then just this whole going on to how we've created our self-image and we've kind of oriented ourselves around that. And where that took me was how caught up people, myself included, can get in that. We're using that as a reference point, giving our opinion on what we keep or where our limits are. Just all of that to me is so deep and makes me reflect on, what is important to me as to who I really am, not what I've created myself to be or to think I am. And when some of that falls away and what's left, maybe how easier things can be. Because when we're caught up in all that stuff, things can look kind of hard. When we're caught up in our self-image that we have created, and then we're not living up to that, or we think we're not living up to it, whatever that looks like. Things can start to feel kind of hard. So when that starts to fall away, because we realize, well, that's all made up, then it seems like possibilities are, well, it's just infinite possibility. And somehow it gave me a sense of calm, which I wasn't quite feeling before I started to read this chapter today. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much in here for me too, like right after that Richard Dawkins quote, there's a line that says, "You are not your job. You are not how much money you have in the bank." And it reminded me of a song I used to love called Yellow Brick Road by a Canadian singer named Rain Maida, who was the lead singer of another band called Our Lady Peace. But the line in the song said, we weren't our money, our age. We weren't our problems, our age, or our paychecks, and we weren't taking anybody's SHIT. But over the course of the last several years with my career kind of going up and down and stuff, like the notion that I'm not my problems, I'm not my paycheck. That already rang true to me back then before I knew anything about the principles or about who I really am. And it's funny because I started thinking about in my Stephen Covey studying days, one of the keys to time management was to figure out all your roles. So I'm a father, I'm a boss, I'm a subordinate, whatever. Figure out all the roles in your life, and then what are your goals for each of those roles, and then put them in your schedule. And how practical and helpful that is for managing your time or managing yourself against time and getting things done. But it's super not helpful to identify as any of those things and to get caught up in thinking that I am all these things. And when you get caught up in identifying as those things, and then you get caught up in measuring your self-worth against how you're performing in each of those areas of your life. And kind of like you just said, Lynn, it's so freeing and calming, and I don't know, freeing is probably the best word for me to describe, like when you can just see all of that for what it is as being a map. It's just made up, like when in that same part of on page 124, the case of mistaken identity, when Jamie's talking about as a baby, like you don't even know that you have hands or fingers or whatever. And I saw a video yesterday on Instagram, and it was a toddler learning to do a thumbs up for the first time. And he's got his hands kind of like curled up, and he's pointing, and he's trying to figure out just how to get just his thumb to work to do a thumbs up. And it might have taken like 20 seconds, and he's like so concentrated on it, looking at his hand and trying to make his thumbs and fingers do what he wants them to do. And then all of a sudden he gets it. And, everyone in the room cheers for him, and he's so happy. But it's like, it was a good illustration for me about, that's how we start building these self-images of ourselves and our map. And, and it's so innocent. And everything in this chapter just reminds us that we can kind of rise above that. Like at the end of that mistaken identity thing, it says, you are not a label. You are not your beliefs, thoughts, or feelings about yourself. You are not the contents of or structure of your thinking, and who you really are is far, far more than you think. So again, mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah. And the sense as well about the idea that who we've thought we are to date, he kind of almost dismisses it in with a very quick few sentences. If you think about it, your body is changing its cells and everything is changing inside you. So how can you be the same person that you thought you were? So that's like, oh, so what is this thing that keeps telling me that I'm something that I don't like or don't want to be, or whatever it is, or even what I could be if only, sort of thing. He says, our bodies are made mostly from water, and all the cells are frequently replaced. In fact, most of the cells in your body are less than 10 years old. So, and who a person is, he says it doesn't change, but their body does. And you call it my body, but who's the me whose body it is? It was a bit difficult actually to read that and actually even understand the sentence, because it's so different from, I'm guessing, what normal everyday thinking is. Like, or it's even the fact that even somebody could ask me that, like it's beyond all sort of beyond my imagination. And yet thinking about it, is indeed, and it brings me back, to the beginning. It's all about something over and beyond, something that's gone before and still is now and will always be. It's not who you think you are. That bit, like, who is that me, is who you really are. Yeah.
I struggled with that. this is not the first time I've read this here or heard it somewhere or read it from somewhere else. So it's not the first time. It's by no means the first time. And I actually do struggle. I just, you know, conceptually, I hear it, but I have to really, really think about that to get that, you know, because it's not really a normal thing. And again, that's probably because this, whatever this is for all of us, that bit is part of what we've created as we have developed in as part of our self-image. Has to be. We see it all the time. Therefore, how can this thing not be me? It's that for me. It's quite a hard thing to get my head around. Actually, don't find that a stretch. Find it a stretch.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's like a process of realizing that that's not who I really am, which then means, well, then that doesn't matter. So let's say I'm a dad, but who I really am isn't a dad. That's just, part of my life. And it's a part that I love so much and is like my favorite parts. But so there's this discomfort of like disassociating with that well, no, but I want to be that.
Yeah.
But and so there's a bit of a fear or a letting go of, what's going to happen if that's not who I am. But then there's another realization at a deeper level of, oh, I can actually be a better dad, knowing that I can go full out and I don't have to worry about the implications of whether I'm being a good dad or a bad dad, or make a good decision or a bad decision, or if my kids do something I don't like, it's not a reflection on who I really am, or like you're just free of all of that stuff. So I can actually be a way better dad coming out of a place of understanding and clarity than I ever could have been coming at it from a whole bunch of made up things about what that means and what the implications of it are.
Yeah.
And then replace dad with any other, coach, employee, husband, anything else you want to substitute for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess again, it's sort of getting caught up in the form, even the question, well, what is dad?
Yeah.
Or if we kind of thinking that, if we move away from that, from the form, it's, well, the formless that's created something that is able to create and continue life, no more, no less. So again, it's even the fact that sometimes we ask ourselves some questions that really keep us in the form and keep us into some kind of I guess questioning in so much as, am I good? Am I not good? Am I a good dad? Am I a good mum? Am I whatever? It's that very same thing that's keeping us there doing that. So it's always the thing about, after having read this, I sort of fully take on the idea of having to move away from that. Like, not even ask myself the question. And like, at one point, I don't know if it's in this chapter or the next, but it's probably the next, but he said, the thing is that the non-form, the formless, the creator of life, if you like, just is. So there is no question mark after the word dad, sort of thing. Just is.
Yeah. I'll read it.
That bit, Elaine, because something else struck me there. Go ahead, Greg.
No, you go ahead.
Sorry. No, I can't find it. It's okay.
I was going to wrap it up with a thought experiment. So if you want to do something before that, go for it.
No, I absolutely can't find it. Doesn't matter. It's good. Actually, the thought experiment, yeah, wrap up with that because I did have thoughts about the thought experiment.
Okay. So the thought experiment on 131. What happens when you consider the fact that clarity, peace, and security are only ever one thought away?
When I read that, I actually wanted it to be the beginning. Recently, I went to an art exhibit in Glasgow a couple of months ago, and it was on all sorts of print, and I didn't understand a lot of it. I'm not in that world. I didn't. So I'm walking around looking at these paintings and creations and their descriptions, and I didn't understand the description. I was appreciative of the art, but I didn't understand the descriptions. And at the end of the exhibit, in that little kind of nook thing, was a print machine and a description of every single. Wow, I wish they put that at the beginning. I've just gone through a whole exhibit and I was appreciating the art and the print, but I couldn't understand the language. And I realized I was thinking about the language. I was thinking about how did they do that and what does that mean, and that's how I felt when I read this thought experiment. What happens when you consider the fact that cloud is flew to everyone one thought away? I felt like, oh, that's the explanation. That just tells me so much and makes things clear. And again, that just goes back to the feeling of it's freeing and the endless possibility. And if we really, really knew that in our heart of hearts, how much less would we get caught up in the minutiae of our thinking and where it takes us, the strength and the craziness of it, I suppose. So that was my feeling when I read the thought experiment.
The thought and the thought that only one thought away sort of makes me think about, yeah, but it kind of has to be the right thought. and just as Lynn was talking, I was kind of thinking, well, what could be a good thought? Just to find that clarity, peace, and security. And I suppose that for me, it would be again, going back to the old scriptures or whatever the old antique ancient people used to teach, something about the thought indeed could be the guiding light, which would again reflect back to one's own inner wisdom and inner sense of security that obviously we have by nature of life. Like, we're still here alive, so we must be pretty safe, kind of thing, until we're not, of course. So yeah, it's kind of given me this idea that, again, and sort of those words, your guiding light, are actually very powerful and very soothing, and like it kind of gives a feeling of, oh, well, I don't need a guiding light from out there. I don't need somebody else's lighthouse again. Because that guiding light is in me. So that perhaps could be the one thought that I need to keep coming back to. Well, it's there. You've got it. Your guiding light. Go look for that. That's one thought enough to move me from a place of maybe upset, anger, and pain, anything, to a more balanced, let's say, state of mind.
For me, I used to think about this as being one thought away. It's like I just need that new one thought and I can get back to happiness, clarity, whatever. And more recently, I've been thinking about more from a subtractive perspective, like Jamie's subtractive psychology notion, which is the one thought that I'm away from is the thought that I'm caught up in right now. Like it's the thought that I'm in that's keeping me away. So the one thought away isn't that I need a new thought, is I just need to see through the thought that I'm caught up in.
Yeah.
And and when I do, I land back in my default clarity, peace, and security. And there's a hopefulness to this, right? It's like anytime I'm in a low mood or my daughter's moved back from university and she's kind of half living here and half living in a new apartment, which she's only partially moved back into. Excuse me. And there's been some arguing and fighting and things not going perfectly smoothly. And in those moments, I can catch myself in the hopefulness of like, oh, I know that this isn't forever. Like it's only one thought away to get back to happiness and clarity, peace and security. It's just kind of a relief. That's maybe the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap up chapter 11 there?
Mm-hmm.